Welcome to another Dragonlance Saga Hangout. It is just us here to chillax a little bit. It is Kieran Fears Wealth the 15th. My name is Adam. Today I'm talking about Dragonlance War Wizard trilogy, formerly known as Legacies. Although we don't actually know if it's changed to Legacies or Trilogies or War Wizard or what, since the first book is called War Wizard, but we know that it was originally called Dragonlance Legacies because of... Okay. Now I need to resolve this because... There. That's supposed to be there. All right, I would like to take a moment and thank the DL Saga YouTube members and Patreon patrons and invite you to consider becoming a member or patron. You can even pick up Dragonlance Media or get $10 signing up to start playing games. And don't forget to pick up a copy of Dragons of Ash and Twilight, the fanfiction anthology that we put together. It is available for free on dlsaga.com. And of course, links in the description below will get you to everywhere you need to go. All right, so this is just a hangout. We just kind of want to talk a little bit about. I just posted also to the community page where like some third party has already reviewed War Wizard. They got an advanced copy somehow. And I want to know, why the hell have I not gotten an advanced copy and reviewed it? Like, I would 100% do that. So Wizards of the Coast, Penguin Random House, whomever needs to hear this, to hook a brother up, because I will share you my reviews and everything. Like, this is a Dragonlance channel. If you're going to talk about a Dragonlance book, why not come here? Of all places. Yeah, I'm just that much bothered. Just that much. All right, so that being said, this all goes back, of course, to Margaret Weiss's post on X from August 4th, 2024, where she says, Tracy and I are pleased to announce Dragonlance Legacies. And this was at the very end of the Dragonlance Destinies trilogy that they just finished. The story of the legendary wizard Magius and his friendship and adventures with the Salamnic knight Huma, published by Random House Worlds 2026. So this is a big, big deal because they had to fight to get their Destinies trilogy out. I mean, like legal battles. They finally got approval for that. They have to use the Dragonlance Classics version of the logo in order to do that, but who really cares? We're getting new books from Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. So that's dope. We love it. Now, the Dragonlance fandom page actually says that there's 3 novels, and it gives names of them. So the first novel name we already know is War Wizard, and of course we can see it right there. The second novel name is Sword and Flame, and the third is The Exile. So just going off of that initial review that I had shared out today from that advanced copy, War Wizard is almost entirely, like the first 80 some odd pages is dedicated just to the birth and early life of Huma and Magius. And that's it. And there's no actual combat or adventuring or anything until you get after that point. And so that's a whole lot of, so that's like the first third of the book. A lot of setup in War Wizard. And so, especially just looking at the cover art there, you know what? I should have done this. Let me add the actual full cover art so that we can just sort of look at it. Because I have, you know, it does look very generic to me. I mean, it's the work is good. I'm not trying to say anything negative about the actual quality of it at all. But it does, you know, it does look generic. I mean, it looks like a generic... How come I can't find it? Where is it? Do I not have it? Could have swore I had it here somewhere. But maybe I don't. Which would be annoying. I'm just going to check one more place before I give up. All right, well, I guess I don't have it here. Let me just look right now. Here it is. Here it is. All right. I'm going to save it where I save all of my stuff. I have a very rigid filing system that I keep all this stuff in. So this is called War Wizard Full Art right here. All right, so let's dive in, shall we? There we go. So that's the full cover art. Let me just sort of make it as big as I can before knocking my face out of the... Yeah, I'm going to have to just make it a little bit smaller. You know what? I could actually just go to another... That's fine. All right, so like I could just do this right here and just put it in here. You know, this is the problem with doing this on the fly, is that I'm not really prepared at all, which is kind of annoying. All right, here we go. There. So this is what we're looking at as far as the War Wizard cover art. Clearly there's dragon reference, which is interesting because this is all leading up to the third Dragon War. So what dragons are out there except for the evil dragons, right? But it's the review said that it leads up to where they're like 19 years old, and that's when they go on an adventure. So that's supposed to be them at 19, which I don't know if you've ever seen a 19-year-old before, but they look in their mid 30 to 40s. Definitely not 19. But what are we going to do? Who cares? So War Wizard is all about like those early formative years of when they get together in their first little adventure. Clearly it's going to deal with ogres, and it's probably going to be dealing with the early expansion of that third Dragon War Dragon Army forces. And however Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman are going to be managing that. And it is interesting because it does bring up that sort of question. Are we going to be alluding to the third Dragon War, or is this going to be isolated? Meaning, is this going to be prophetic and give us those foreshadowing moments like we got from the Forest Master for Sturm Brightblade that wouldn't be realized until the second novel in the Chronicles trilogy, Dragons of Winter Night, from Dragons of Spring Dawn or Autumn Twilight? Or is it going, and even arguably, I mean, they do love a foreshadowing, Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. They foreshadowed Flint's death by him constantly having chest pains and becoming short-winded. So all of that is a lead up to, of course, the ultimate outcome that they're going to face. Are they going to do the same thing with Magius and Huma, where they're alluding or foreshadowing the sacrifice that they're going to have to ultimately make? And I think that is an interesting idea on, if they are going to be foreshadowing that. Are they going to be doing it through a dragon coming by and I don't know, maybe, I mean, we're just spitballing here, but maybe another person is killed by the dragon in order to run the dragon off. Like they face off against it as a honorable Knight of Slammy, or maybe Huma as a, squire faces off against it fearlessly and is sort of ridiculed because maybe he's hurt or something, but that would be a foreshadow of him going up against insurmountable odds in the same way he does in the third Dragon War. So that would be interesting. But again, we have to remember that the focus on this is seemingly on Magius, especially when you look at the titles. So War Wizard very much sounds like this is going to be Magius's first time in combat using his spells. Sword and Flame very much sounds like that. So basically, we're paralleling the Raistlin Majir and Kariman Majir novels, where we have the Soul Forge, which is sort of their first traveling to we get, Raistlin's experience as a young mage and then taking his test of high sorcery. And then we have some of the preludes or prequels like the Meeting Sextet novels, where they go off on their first adventure together and learn to be mercenaries and work in tandem with Caramin's sword arm and Raceland's magic. It seems very much like they're sort of echoing that pattern here. What's interesting, I think, is that if we start with War Wizard, which is, of course, Magius, and then we go to Sword and Flame, which is Huma and Magius, the Exile is the third book. Assuming these novel titles hold up, what do you guys think? Does that mean that it's going to be like Magius is going to be exiled from the Orders of High Sorcery? Because I'm trying to remember from the Destinies trilogy and Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman's version of Huma and Magius, I think Magius was in the Orders at that point. So if it's not him, is it talking about like the antagonist, or is it talking about Huma, or, you know, I would be interested to find out, because ultimately when you reflect back on the Magius from Richard Knack's stories, Magius goes through everything from like leaving the Orders of High Sorcery and then joining the dragon armies and then leaving the dragon armies and being his own version of an exile. And oh, hold on. That was not supposed to switch. You're supposed to be paused, yo. There we go. So I do find that kind of interesting. Here, let me showcase more of it by shrinking it. I just can't wait for this novel. Like, this first novel is really going to set the tone on whether or not people are really excited for the other two novels in the trilogy. So there's a lot for Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman writing on that first novel on whether or not we are behind them, you know? So that's the setup. It was originally called Dragonlance Legacies in 2024, but since then, at least the Dragonlance Wiki has called it the War Wizard series. And again, I had made a note about this that I thought was strange when we initially saw it and did a news article about it. But come on now. There. When you look at this, it doesn't say the trilogy. Yeah, it's out next month. In less than a month, on the 4th, it's going to be out. So in like 19 days. It doesn't mention the trilogy name, and every other Dragonlance book does. So I wonder if that's just an oversight for the early release ones, or if they're going to correct that in the final release, or if it is just called the War Wizard trilogy. And it starts with War Wizard, and then the second will be War Wizard Sword and Flame, and the third one will be War Wizard The Exile. That would be interesting, though a bit odd, considering we have 40 plus years of precedent for naming conventions and stuff. You know what I mean? So, in any case. So the upcoming book is going to be dropping next month on August 4th. Like 19 days. It is the launch of the Dragonlance Legacies or the War Wizard trilogy. And I think we need to talk a little bit about canon, because this is a big deal. It'll come out as a trilogy once the books are released. Yeah, I could see that too. I could definitely see that. So the elephant in the room for all of this, and for any longtime Dragonlance fan, is Richard A. Knack. His beloved 1988 novel, The Legend of Huma, was, again, written in 1988, 4 years after Dragons of Autumn Twilight. Like, that is precedent upon precedent. That's only 38 years ago. So, you know, we're getting right close to it being 40 years of a precedent that is already thrown up and just discarded by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman with their Destinies trilogy. But now they're actually doubling down and saying, no, we're going to write our own trilogy, not about the Third Dragon War, but about the characters that already have been written about. Comics have been done about the novel and everything. So it's going to be Oh, you haven't read Legend of Huma? It's a lot of people's initial introduction to Dragonlance, and it's just one of those beloved novels. And Richard A. Knack did a really great job addressing the legend and trying his best to sort of create an original story based around the legend, because there's like 2 or 3 different versions of the legend that were released in the time, like in the novels and the source books, talking loosely in very much poetic terms about that third Dragon War conclusion. So he had to take that, like a Michael Williams poem, basically, and build an entire story off of it. And they apparently approved it then. You know, it was in Leaves from the End of the Last Home. And now they're just totally saying, you know what? No, screw it. We're going to do this. So when fans online asked Margaret Weis how War Wizard would fit with Knack's established lore, her response was characteristically direct. This is our story. Weis and Hickman have always marched to the beat of their own drum, treating the core world they created in 1984 as theirs to shape, regardless of what spin-off authors wrote in the 80s and 90s. So they are entirely disregarding everything that Richard A. Knack has written about these characters, which is interesting because there's a lot that is a direct fallout from, or you could even say legacy from the, oh my gosh, The Legend of Huma. For example, the follow-up novel, Kaz the Minotaur, and then the follow-up novels from that, and the trilogies that came from that, and the short stories that came from that, and the gaming products that came from that. An entire Minotaur sub-race has been created, the Kazalati tribe, based on Kaz the Minotaur, which is based on Legend of Huma from Kaz the Minotaur there. So there's a lot that is this sort of timeline of stringed out stories based on that first Legend of Huma novel that is just completely being wiped out. And you shouldn't be surprised, because we saw in Destiny's trilogy, and I know people say that they didn't completely renege the Chaos War, but they did, because you cannot have the Chaos War without chaos, and they left chaos in a black hole under the gods' watchful eyes. So you cannot get more buried than that. So clearly they're like, there is no Fifth Age of Krynn. There is no, even their own trilogy of the War of Souls. There's none of that. It all stops at the beginning of Dragons of Spring Dawning, because no Grey Gem can be cracked open by the Ire to Ogres. Hence, no Chaos War. Hence, no Dragonlance Fifth Age, and no abandoning of the people of Krynn again. They wrote it, so you can clearly see that they completely redefined the entire brand that way. And of course, you can ignore that in your own home stories or your own headcanon and move on however you want. But you can't deny that it was done. So here is the debate on all of this. How do people feel, and you guys watching, how do you feel about Weis and Hickman overwriting Richard A. Knack's The Legend of Huma? Because this trilogy may never actually touch the actual Third Dragon War. They already did that in Destinies, so they don't need to retread that ground. So this is everything leading up to that point. So do you think that because there's not going to be any Kaz, because it's solely, as far as we know, going to be about Magius and Huma, and of course Huma's sister that Magius loves, is going to involve that. How do you feel about Richard A. Knack's story being totally retconned in the same way that all of the Fifth Age stories, and even the second half of their own Dragons of Summer Flame, were retconned, and their own War of Souls being retconned? At this point in the Dragonlance saga, are you just used to this type of stuff because stories retcon later stories all the time? It doesn't mean it's a big deal. It's after it's been happening so many times. I keep hitting pause on this and it keeps going anyway. And I got to be honest, I don't really care. So you feel like that's okay. Thanks for tuning in, Goldman. The original authors are writing whatever they want, but it sure is kooky. I forgot things pretty easily after consuming them. Just make the original media that much better for you. I tend to agree. I enjoyed, because there's always been wild inconsistencies from D&D editions to D&D editions, from novel to novel, because there's always been that sort of discord within what is actual canon, what is actual lore when it comes to Dragonlance. I don't really mind. I take what I like and I ignore what I don't like. And to be quite honest, even the stuff I don't particularly enjoy, I still will read and I will still visit and I will still probably include if it happens to fit the story that I'm telling as a game master, or if, I just want to talk or write about Dragonlance. I always include all that old, weird, wonky stuff just because it's part of what makes Dragonlance Dragonlance. It's a little messy, and I kind of like that a little bit, even though I complain about it. I kind of like it. So for those of you out there, if you're okay with it, well, then you're clearly going to be on board. The question being, if you're not okay with it, are you going to read this and just consider it non-canon, or are you going to try to avoid it? And I would hope you wouldn't try to avoid it, just because we don't get a lot of Dragonlance content. I know there's a lot of fan content out there. I separate the two between official and fan content, and you can't get more official than Mark Weiss and Tracy Hickman. So, let me know what you think about that. I'd be very interested to see where you sort of land on that. And then ultimately, are you a purist who wants Knack's version respected, or do you give the original creators a blank check to rewrite history? Clearly, they're going to do it regardless of whether you write that check or not. But it is interesting. You think for them to invigorate the long-standing series like this, it's probably easier for the authors to write new material with the existing world. Yeah, and they haven't read all of the books themselves, and they don't want to read all the books. It's 200 novels. I'm not even done reading all the books, and I've been doing this for a while now. So, hey Buster, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in. Honestly, not just Dragonlance. If you hear it's good, you'll read it. If you heard it wasn't, then I would pass. That's interesting. And when it comes to anything but fantasy, I'm kind of on that same vein. Like a horror novel, if you tell me a horror novel is good, I'll probably read it. Or a science fiction novel, I'll probably read it because I don't have that investment. If you tell me it's not good, then I'll probably avoid it. But with Dragonlance, I'll probably still read it, even if I don't enjoy it, simply because it's just one of those IPs that I have a special connection to. It's like Star Wars is the other one for me, the sci-fi fantasy side of me. I love Star Wars. Clive Barker's horror novels are another one. I will always, they're not all gold, and they're not all written for adults, but I will always read anything that Clive Barker puts out because I desperately love his work. Same thing with Dragonlance. I will always read it, and everyone has their version of addiction. Yeah, 100%. Chris, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in. You'd prefer Knack to be respected, but you'll take what you can get at this point. I mean, that's fair. You love plenty of media that people consider awful. Yeah. I mean, we all have our own opinions. So, we're going to live our own version of our best lives and be happy with it. And everyone else can, shake their fist if they want to, or just accept it. So here's another thing here. Magius as a foil. So in Dragonlance Destinies, we caught a glimpse of Magius and Huma. Magius is a rare example of a staggeringly powerful high-tier archwizard who isn't a sociopath, a renegade, or corrupted by a dark god. And how refreshing is it that we get a story about a good wizard that isn't just Raistlin Majere 2.0, that Raistlin Majere is actually looking up to? I find that fascinating. He's actually a decent, good dude. I mean, in Richard A. Knack's, there was something off about him. And you could, he's an amalgamation of all his life experience and all the renegade activity done and the time he was with Draco's army in the Third Dragon War. And so, he had history which colored his perspective and worldview. In these, we never got that, especially in the Destinies trilogy. Magius never was part of the evil dragon army. So he was always just the friend of Huma that always had his back, and he always showed up no matter what the other Knights of Solamnia thought. He was always going to be there. And it may have been a dark stain on Huma's record simply because he hung around a sorcerer in an order which does not trust magic. But it is very refreshing, I think, and let me know what you think, that Magius is kind of cool. He's not a dick. So let's see. Greetings from Brazil. Awesome, Carlos. Thanks for tuning in. It's amazing how well Chronicles holds up, though. Weiss and Hickman are very accessible writers and good storytellers. Your son hates reading, but is really enjoying Chronicles. Have you tried having him read the children's version, which come in the chapter books? That might be a good way to get him to start enjoying reading. But ultimately, just exposing him to reading is the best thing. Ravenclaw, thanks for tuning in. You really were hoping that Weiss and Hickman would introduce some lore beyond Dragonlance Destinies rather than going back to Huma and Magius. Wasn't this story already told? Well, that's what we're saying, is that they're ignoring what was already told, and they're doing their own thing. Wow. They're telling their own story, and they don't really care that it's already been explored through Richard A. Knack at all. And that's how they've always written their stuff. So we either accept it or we don't. Let's see. Chronicles and Legends still come up in your D&D conversations, yet I've never played the DL setting since you've played D&D. Really? You gotta join one of my games, man. I'm going to be having free games here coming up not too far from here. So if you ever get a chance to join one, I would welcome you. I love playing in Dragonlance. There's so much history that you can explore in and play in, and you can literally play any version or style of a game ever. So you haven't played since, or you have played since 79 or haven't played since 79, it's never too late. Nostalgia, man. It's never too late. Hey, Terry, how you doing? You mean you read The War of Souls for nothing? You accept whatever story you like. You mean the OG authors did fail with the Dark Sword trilogy? That was the one trilogy of theirs I never read. I really loved, I've got to remember the name of it now. It was, the guy had tattoos all over his body that helped power his magic. They had Zifnab instead of Fizban. It was it'll come to me. But it was another one of their trilogies that they'd written. And they'd written a couple of them that I really, really enjoyed. But, yeah, what are you going to do? You can't love them all. Everyone has to have mediocre fails sometimes. See, if there's going to be an unexpected cameo in the trilogy, what character would you want to see pop up? Kaz. I would love to see Kaz pop up in this, like for real. I think, look, if they're going to completely ignore Knack's version, at least give us a Minotaur cameo that we could assume would be Kaz. You don't have to give us Kaz himself or even name him. Deathgate Cycle, that was it, Chris. Thank you. But I would definitely like to see some sort of Minotaur pop up, just as an homage, Let's see. They could have Destina pop up for an instant and be like, oops, that would be funny. Like they went back too far. I don't want to see Tasselhoff. I do not want to see Tasselhoff with a freaking device of time journeying. I'm afraid to death that they'll do something like that. And that would be the worst in my opinion. So please no Tasselhoff. I love Tasselhoff as character, but he doesn't have to be in every damn story. So please. All right. So if the original authors want to go back and write story arcs that they were originally written by other authors, you can dig it. Yeah. And that's kind of what they're doing. You're currently chasing down the rest of the Dragonlance stuff for your collection. It can get expensive nowadays and hard to find, but good luck. For sure, good luck. All right, so what's up next here? Let's see. Solamnic Culture versus the Gift of Magic. So according to the teaser blurbs, the first Grand Master of the Knights, Vinus Solamnus, strictly wrote into the code that the practice of magic is, quote, secretive, inherently deceitful, and dishonorable. However, Magius grows up in Solamnia that treats magic like a disease. So, here's the question. Huma is a young man explicitly training to uphold the Solamnic measure, yet his best friend is an active practitioner of the exact art that his order despises. How do we think the book is going to handle Huma's internal conflict between loyalty to his strict military code and loyalty to his childhood friend. Because if he's just a kid and this is only telling them that to the age of like 19, he's going to be a squire. He might join the order at the very end of the novel or something because of the outcome of the novel's adventure, but he's going to be a squire to someone. And so they're going to be very strict on him. I think that's going to hold him back. Do you guys think that's going to hold him back? Do you think it's going to matter? Do you think he's going to care? Is he just going to say, look, he's my friend. I don't care who he is or what he does. He's not my friend because he's a magician. He is my friend and he happens to be a magic user. Like, what do you think that's going to happen? Because look, the Knights of Solamnia are as bigoted as every other organization, race, faction in Krynn. So they're going to have words about it for sure. It'll just be interesting on how they manage it, you know? You'd like to see how the Knights of Takhisis fare without the Dark Queen stealing the world of Krynn and tipping the scales in their favor. It would be interesting if they go back to that timeline and in the absence of the Grey Gem, continue that Knights of Takhisis story for sure. I think that would be very, very interesting because it would be a completely different experience. Obviously, the Paladin accepted that Takhisis should be able to unite all the people against chaos. And so he sort of led his followers and the different nations in their own way to work with the Knights of Takhisis. But that's not the case anymore. So it would be interesting to have that full-blown war, you know, the second War of the Lance, as it were, to see how that pans out. So friends over factions, you always say. Yeah, that's how I live my life, you know. I have friends who are in different political parties. I have friends that are different religions. I have friends that have different views of hobbies and movies and everything. So, like, if I was, you know, if my work, for example, said, hey, I don't like you hanging out with Mr. X or Y, and you're going to have to, you know, adjust that, you know, you're going to have to change that lifestyle. I was just going to be like, whatever, I'm doing my job. Leave me alone. It's none of your business. Ends up feeling like the twins of the Legends trilogy. That's fine, but you think they should be distinctive for sure. And that is the other side of this, is that are we just retreading ground with Raistlin and Karaman? Or Raistlin and Sturm? They certainly made the direct parallel in the Destinies trilogy, so that's clearly how they see the characters. Are we just going to be reliving the same story beats? Because I hope not. Magius is much cooler. Raistlin was a total dick to Sturm. So, and Magius kind of wants to get with Huma's sister, so he's got to be cool to Huma. So I think that would be really interesting to see how he goes with that. Lord Toad was a hero and you're tired of pretending he wasn't. Hey, Weisenland, you're absolutely right. He was, especially if you read the Lord Toad novel. And it was very fascinating. I enjoyed it a lot. You wonder why Paladin would not think it would be better if he united the people rather than Takhisis. Oh, it's because they didn't have the uniformed military might. They were still operating under the fact that the Knights of Takhisis were a unified, fully trained for years military force ready to dominate. And even the Whitestone forces were fractured, and they didn't have a unified re-signing of the Swordsheath Scroll or anything like that. So they just didn't have the upfront might. That's why. Let's see. You'd enjoy a different timeline with this trilogy because otherwise the predetermined ending was already seen in Legend of Huma and will be anticlimactic. I don't think they're going to be touching the third Dragon War in this. If they do, it's going to be at the very, very end of the very third novel because they've already talked about the outcome in the Destinies trilogy with their version of Magius and Huma. And so we've already lived that. So there's no reason to relitigate it or revisit it at all. It's already been done for them. Let's see. Maybe with the changes in Dragonlance Destinies, there will be a different ending. I mean, it's their ending they've already written. So I would be surprised if they rewrote their own ending. You know what I mean? Your issue with prequels, you have problems staying interested if you genuinely don't know how it will turn out. See, that's interesting because that's what actually draws me to read it, is because my curiosity overcomes my personal biases about the story, where I just want to find out how they're going to end the story. So like Destiny's, there were elements of it I really liked, and there's elements I really didn't enjoy, but I still kept reading it because I was curious about how they were going to end it, you know? And I've read a lot of Dragonlance novels, and there's a lot of really bad Dragonlance novels, so it's never stopped me before. So it's definitely not going to stop me now. Another unpopular opinion, but Gully Dwarves are cool and interesting race and made for fun PCs. Gully Dwarves are the R2-D2 of this world. They are the real heroes. they help people out when no one else will help people out, and they have information. So I kind of agree with you. I totally kind of agree with you. All right, let's move on to the next little bit here. Old school gaming application of all of this. If you were running a tabletop campaign set during this era, the Third Dragon War, of course, this is before the Third Dragon War, but this is still when it's all, culminating and building up. How heavily would you penalize a wizard player trying to navigate Solamnic territories? Would there be inherent danger, or would the Knights of Solamnia just like discard them and be like, move along, get past my watch point or whatever? Or would they try to detain them? Because they're not saying they're illegal. They're not saying they cannot exist. They're just saying that they don't enjoy them and they don't want them around. So and you can do parallels with our real world, and that usually ends in some really massive hate crimes. So you could see how that would then unfold, especially in a war-torn world like Dragonlance, that it would also end up in hate crimes. But yeah, what do you think in the game? Do you think that they would, or would you have it be that the Knights of Solamnia are overtly physically bigoted, where they're going to try to apprehend or end them, or just force them to go around their, roads or towns or whatever? It'd be interesting. And then another question would be, what would you force them to hide their spellcasting completely, or let them play out that social ostracization mechanically through negative reaction modifiers? And one thing that I always like to do is warn people, if I'm the dungeon master and I got players and they want to play a class or a race that it does have bigotry associated with it, I warn them about that. I give them upfront notice. Like, look, if you want to play, for example, a tiefling in the Age of Mortals, you need to understand people will see you as a monster. If you want to play a draconian, people will see you as a monster. If you want to play a kender, people will see you as a thief and a liar and try to run you out of town every second they get. But you are free to play that. But just don't be surprised when the world acts the way that I'm warning you that the world is going to act, because it will impact your ability to have fun. And it has impacted players' ability to have fun. They get frustrated and they get very sort of pulled out of the game and the world. Like, why are you doing this to my character? And I was like, I told you, these are the preconceived biases of this world. You wanted to play this character. I warned you what was going to come of playing this character. You still chose it. You have to live with those consequences, or play a different character. It's really that simple. So are you guys as strict as I am with that, or do you just sort of open it up and be much more casual? And there's no right or wrong answer. Everyone does, play the game however you like to play it. Let's see. Solamnic Witch Hunters burn at the stake. We saw that with the Knights of the Divine Hammer. So it's not far from, a solid idea. Actual magical artifact over dead lizard on a stick. Right. They might get the escort to the city gates fairly often, or some serious rope games if they are in the wrong town, for sure. Yeah, you treat magic users like you would tieflings, ostracized and badly treated, but given an opportunity to overcome those impressions. And that's the strength of Dragonlance, in my opinion, is that it starts from that bigoted position and it grows through experience and perspective. So to acceptance. And that's how I don't like to begin and end in a position of negativity and animosity or hatred. I like to start with that reality because it is predetermined in Dragonlance, and then end with, oh, you have proven yourself to be a trustworthy and good hero, and we will celebrate you. You got to be comfortable with being hated. Make friends with your companions. That's fair. That's fair. The Tiefling analogy is great. You still don't like the fact that D&D turned demon spawn into such a playable race. Yeah, I agree. And in Angels with Asimar, however you say their name, Asimar, they're very much like angels, in my opinion. And Dragonlance happens to have a race that's very similar with the Phaethons. And so I just sort of reskin them. But it is one of those, just another race that is wildly different. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to talk about before we close out this hangout is the time travel / prequel fatigue. Look, some corners of our fandom have noted that Weiss and Hickman fairly have spent their last few books looking backward, first with time travel shenanigans of the Destinies trilogy, and now going back over 1,000 years to the Third Dragon War for Legacies. And let's not even bring up the time traveling with every other one of their stories, because it is ever present. So, do you prefer the authors are filling in the legacy myth gaps of Krynn's ancient history? Or do you wish that they would move the timeline forward past the War of Souls and show us what the future of Anslon looks like? Do you enjoy this looking back and fleshing out? Or do you just want to move forward with, where they left off last? It's a tough conversation to have because they only have finite amount of time. And look, we're all getting older. We're not going to have them around forever. I don't mean to be, brutal about it, but it's true. We all have a finite time on this planet, So, if they only have another trilogy left, if they only have another 2 trilogies left, what would you like them, or what would you prefer them to write about? I'm with some of you in the chat where I want them to go from the Second Dragon War. I want them to go from the Dragons of Summer Flame without chaos forward. So we see that invasion of the Knights of Takhisis and we find out what that resolution is. Tanis is alive, Steel Brightblade's alive, and we have to deal with that whole thing. Tanis would probably still die, I think, just because, he did not die from chaos. But we have all of that storytelling that could still be told and investigated and explored. I would really like to find that part of it. But what do you all think? You would move forward, Ravenclaw. That's fair. I'd like that too. You wish they would move the timeline forward. You're fascinated with the idea of the World War, Taladas versus Anslon with the Minotaur occupation coming. That would be very, very interesting, I think, as well. Going all the way to the end of the Age of Mortals where it left off. Time travel is the easiest way to show character development. You love hearing new ideas from old tales, but you're okay with no more time travel. 8 Soulforge, thanks for tuning in. Your problem is that your obsession with the Dragonlance obsession is Raceland, so you don't know how much more they can do within the time traveling device. You're afraid. Yeah, I mean, and the thing is you could still tell stories with Raceland just within, that before the Dragons of Autumn Twilight era, or during that, from the end of the War of the Lance to the beginning of Legends, that timeline. There's some time there where he was, as far as we know, just studying in the Towers of High Sorcery as the Master of Past and Present. But what if he went on another adventure? What if he had to pull his brother into it for a little bit of protection? What if he pulled his sister Kitiara into it? And that's why she thought of him helping her rule the planet in the absence of Takhisis or something, or working for Takhisis with him, which prompted the very beginning actions of Legends. There is still a time where you could have a side quest between Chronicles and Legends with Raceland, Kitiara, and Karaman. I think it would be a very interesting one, because Karaman would be a slop, so you would have to deal with that sort of slovenly, drunken type of character. Kitiara would be wildly fascinating because she has the Mycerum, the crown of power. She has the remnant forces, for the Blue Ladies' War and stuff. And it's before she actually invades Palanthas. So she's building up all those remnants. There's story there that could be told, I think. And I think that would be very, very interesting to explore. So that's another trilogy I would love to see them take a crack at, Let's see, what else? Time travel nonsense opens a Pandora's box that can't be closed. Well, they've definitely opened it, and it hasn't been closed yet. So you might be right. You never considered an alternative Summer Flame with Tanis, Sturm, Magius, Steel. That's fascinating. I mean, I wouldn't have Magius there. But yeah, like Tannen, Sturm, Steel. What is the other brother's name? Well, he died. The two brothers of Palin die. So it'd be Palin and Steel and whomever else. You know what I mean? So you wonder if the Elven nations would ever reunite. See, that's what I want. Also, there's a lot I want. I'm clearly greedy. I would love to see it. Like, we had the Elven Nations trilogy, but it didn't end with like, and they all lived happily ever after. They just carved out a new nation for themselves in the wastelands of Kerr, and that's just not good enough to me. I want the elves to retake their homelands, both Quillenstein and Sylvanesty, and they don't have to always get along, but at least have some sort of commingling Synthel Elish between the two nations after they retake it from the Minotaurs. And I think that would be a fascinating story to tell. The existing elven nation that has unified in Kerr has to get the help and support of the Legion of Steel, which has already helped them before, and the Knights of Solamnia, and then have them all invade and try to stop the oncoming rush of the Minotaur nation. I think that would be a great, great trilogy of novels to explore. Let's see, what else? Dang, there's too many good ideas. I'm running out of time here. I think once the science fiction and fantasy are totally intertwined, and not just from time travel, but the worlds and magic technology. Yeah, I also think they have done a pretty decent job. They set up different timelines for us to explore, which I think is fun. And the way that they framed the idea of the timelines through the river of time and different tributaries and stuff, I think it's an interesting concept that allows you to pretty much do anything you want with. So I do kind of like that. Let's see. Caraman had a son named Sturm. Oh, that's the one you were talking about. My bad. Elven Reconquista. Anyone got the War Wizard pre-ordered? I have the audiobook pre-ordered. I'm waiting to see if they drop the price of the actual physical book before I order that. It's already on discount, which is not a good sign, but hopefully it'll drop a little bit more before I buy it. You also want to know, Weiss and Tracy Hickman would actually write Legends if they would think it would be their last... Would actually write Legends if they would think it would be their last trilogy of Dragonlance. I'm not sure I understand that question. Unified Elven Society that has the best aspects of Khaganski, Sylvanesty, Quillenstein would be great. Timelines versus actual time travel is different for sure. Oh yeah, for sure. Even though they do actually time travel, which creates the timelines through the MacGuffin of not only the spell, but also the device of time journeying. I mean, it's been a part of Dragonlance since Legends, you know. So, all right. Well, thank you guys for hanging out. I think that's kind of it. I don't really have anything else I wanted to chat about when it comes to this novel. I am very excited for War Wizard and what it portends for the Dragonlance Saga. And I love the idea that we already have supposed names of the follow-up novels to it, being Sword and Flame, and then the last one being The Exile. I mean, it whets my appetite, you know? Like, it's that Pavlovian bell where I just start drooling. Like, what's coming? What's coming? I'm just so excited for it. So the August 4th is going to be a great day. I'll give you my non-spoiler review on August 4th in the evening, and then I'll read the entire novel again and give you my spoiler review a week later. So you have a full week to explore it, or just wait until you want to listen to the spoiler review when you're done, you know, whenever that may be. So glad you could check it live, Terry, as well. Appreciate all of you tuning in. That is going to do it for this Dragonlance Hangout. What do you think of the upcoming War Wizard trilogy? Do you prefer Weiss and Hickman's Huma and Magius or Nax? Feel free to email me at info@dlsaga.com or leave a comment below. I would like to take a moment and remind you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and click the like button. It all goes to help other Dragonlance fans learn about this channel and its content. Thank you to creator patrons Aaron Hardy and D. Robert Handy, producer patron David Galindo, developer patrons Chris Androu and Sam Ruiz, and all of the YouTube members. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of Dragonlance Saga, and I hope you'll join in that celebration. Thank you for watching. This has been Adam with Dragonlance Saga, and until next time, Slanjavar.